Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Boxing insider Rick Lacier said this in reference to Teofimo Lopez. He says, Teofimo obviously has an overinflated view of his worth to boxing, declining a fight as an ESPN top-ranked main event because it's on a Friday and not a Saturday tells you all you need to know about Teofimo's perceived value that's in his mind only. And now doesn't have a new date for his next fight. A shame he doesn't take advice from those that are a lot smarter than him. And now, the quote-unquote takeover is on the sidelines until when? You can't make this shit up.
So I take it he's not going to be fighting Brian Norman.
And the word on the street is because the fight would have went down on a Friday instead of a Saturday. Now, you tell me how you're supposed to negotiate with a guy like that.
A guy like that doesn't want to fight, and he's using that as an excuse.
Teofimo makes the same money on a Friday that he would make on a Saturday. His contract minimum is set. And that fight with Brian Norman, that wasn't going to be a pay-per-view.
You're not leaving extra money on the table because the fight happens on a Friday instead of a Saturday.
And this is yet another example of how Top Rank can't twist these guys' arms or hold them at gunpoint and force them to do what they want to do. Ultimately, it was up to Teofimo if he wanted to fight next month on a Friday against Brian Norman, and he didn't want to do it. There's nothing they being Top Rank, there's nothing they could have did about that.
It was up to Teofimo.
Well, he's worried about the show being on a Friday instead of a Saturday when you're gonna make the same money, and as far as the ratings, the viewing figures, that's Top Rank's problem, not yours.
That's ESPN's problem, not yours.
You can't make a fight for this kid without there being some kind of a problem.
No, I have nothing but respect for Boots. But we've known each other for a long time now. We won the 2015. We won the national Golden Gloves together. We were both 17, so it's a great fight. People want to see it, then we'll do it. You know, I don't say no to any fight. You know, as long as it's eye catching and eye candy to all of you that are watching right now. That's what really matters. You know. So, however, my main focus is truthfully Crawford, and I know so it is for him too. So we'll see what happens down the line. We'll see what happens for us this whole year and for the next year to come.
So when I see him crashing Canelo Alvarez's party and name-dropping Terence Crawford and talking about Terence Crawford, it becomes painfully obvious why. You don't have anything going on.
That's why you're poking out your chest, piping up, talking about Crawford. You want to fight Crawford?
It's because you're not giving the journos anything else to write about. You're not giving the boxing fans anything to talk about or look forward to. So you start talking about something you probably aren't even after.
It's wolf tickets.
Michaela Mayer and Sandy Ryan are set to be headlining a top-ranked show on a Friday next month. And it seems to me that Teofimo was supposed to be part of that show where Bruce Carrington is going to be fighting and Xander Zayas is going to be fighting, Michaela Mayer is going to be fighting, and it looks like Top Rank wanted Teofimo to headline.
They wanted him to be the main event, his fight with Brian Norman.
This would have went down in New York City at the theater in Madison Square Garden, the Hulu Theater, as some might have known it. When you think about Lopez versus Norman being a part of that show, that would have been a big show. That would have been a nice stacked card. All those names: Zayas, Carrington, Mayer, Lopez. But because the show's going down on a Friday, that's why Teofimo doesn't want to do it. So now, Teofimo might sit out what remains of the year. He doesn't have a fight date now.
No.
And the story is because the show's going down on a Friday instead of a Saturday, when he's going to make the same money on a Friday that he makes on a Saturday, so what difference does it make?
Your contract minimum is the same on a Friday as it is on a Saturday.
So when content creators try to go on the attack when it comes to Top Rank, as if they're the bad guys. They're always the bad guys. They're always the ones in the wrong.
Are you sure?
Teofimo Lopez, they can't make a fight for this kid without there being a problem. From one fight to the next, there's always some drama that unfolds. Always some discord for a guy who's never even played the big room at Madison Square Garden. You're not as big a draw as you think you are.
You don't command the size audience that you think you do. You're not worth the money you think you're worth.
And in terms of the fighting inside the ring, you're not the fighter you make yourself out to be either. You fought a club fighter in your last fight. You must have wanted a lighter touch and you got one.
Got touched up.
Lumped up by Steve Claggett with both your eyes puffed up. Both your eyes were swollen. So when he's doing the rounds on social media and talking to all the content creators and the interviewers, piping up his chest and saying that he wants Terence Crawford on the heels of all of this, That's why I don't believe him.
He doesn't want that fight.
No, I don't think he wants that Crawford fight. What I think he's doing is trying to draw attention to himself by mentioning Crawford because he doesn't have anything else going on. He knows there's a strong chance he might sit out what remains of this year because he's being difficult. So the only way to stay relevant is to talk about somebody else. Should this year come and go, all Teofimo would have done is go the distance with Steve Claggett.
That's it.
So you're gonna piss away that amount of time for no reason other than the show would go down on a Friday instead of a Saturday. You know what I think? I think he doesn't really want to fight Brian Norman. And that's his excuse. That's his way out.
It's a piss-poor excuse, but that's what it is. It's an excuse.
A lame excuse.
From a problematic fighter who always has a problem.
North of super lightweight, at middleweight, Danny Garcia thinks Terence Crawford fight makes perfect sense if he dethrones Erislandy Lara. But is he going to? Danny Garcia introduced a fascinating scenario to entice superstar Terence Crawford to face him as Crawford moves up in weight and considers a potential matchup with Saul Canelo Alvarez in a generational super fight. If Garcia dethrones WBA middleweight title holder Erislandy Lara September 14th at the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, Garcia proposed the idea that Crawford should move up and face him at 160 as a way to prepare for the gradual move up to 168 to face Canelo. You never know. That makes perfect sense, Garcia told Boxing Scene on Monday of the matchup with Crawford. If we fought, he'd be going for his fifth title in a weight division, and I'd be going for my fourth title in a different weight class. I gotta get through Lara first.
I don't know if he's going to.
But just for argument's sake, let's say that he does. Compared to what 154 has to offer, a fight with Danny at 160, even though it's at 160, seems a more winnable fight to me, more winnable for Terence Crawford. That in terms of risks versus rewards. A fight with the very awkward and statuesque Sebastian Fundora, or the winner of Zhu versus Bakram Murtazaliev, I view those as more challenging fights than a Danny Garcia fight, even though a Danny Garcia fight would be at 160.
Crawford.
You never know. That makes perfect sense, Garcia told Boxing Scene on Monday of the matchup with Crawford. If we fought, he'd be going for his fifth title in a weight division, and I'd be going for my fourth title in a different weight class. I gotta get through Lara first, but it would be a great matchup, and it makes sense for the both of us.
He didn't want this fight that bad when they were both at the same weight for years. When they were both there at 147, Danny wasn't jumping out of his skin to fight Terence Crawford, so why is he all of a sudden now so enthusiastic and so open to it?
Well, think about the middleweight champions, the ones that are there. That let's say Danny pulls this off and he beats Lara. Think about who's there with him. There's not big money in a Carlos Adames unification match or a Yanni Bekalam Kanalai unification match, and those fights would be dangerous for Danny.
They don't have Saudi money behind them.
Terence Crawford does. So comparing them to Terence Crawford, Danny would rather fight Terence Crawford because he, like Terence Crawford, is a welterweight that moved up. Danny Garcia, a two-division champion, faced Crawford twice in the amateurs, going 1-1 against the pound-for-pound great. Crawford won a title in a fourth weight division this past Saturday by dethroning junior middleweight title holder Israel Madrimov in a methodically patient performance in what was his debut at 154. Crawford has discussed the possibility of moving up in weight to challenge Canelo, and Garcia laid out a scenario to make that happen as he sat in his dressing room in Midtown Manhattan, waiting for his press conference with Lara to start. Their bout is the co-feature to Canelo defending his three super middleweight titles against Edgar Berlanga on September 14th at the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas in a PBC pay-per-view on Prime Video on Mexican Independence Day weekend. Danny Garcia hasn't seen action since July of 2022. You heard that right. Ahead of the upcoming Lara fight, this guy hasn't fought in 2 years. So ahead of a Lara fight, when he already starts looking ahead to a potential Crawford fight. There's a champion right there on your side of the street, and we all know how PBC fighters are insistent. They face fighters that are on their side of the street. That historically, that's what they prefer. Garcia didn't think the scoring in Crawford's win against Madrimov was controversial on Saturday. Definitely a competitive fight, but I had Crawford winning because the other guy wasn't busy, Garcia said. He wasn't throwing a lot of punches. He was the champion, but Crawford was the name. The other guy did good, but he wasn't active enough.
Now that I actually agree with. There were too many quiet moments, too many long spells where Madrimov is waiting to make his next move and looking for a way in, but he's just not throwing enough, and what he is throwing are single shots, single punches.
Despite his comments on facing Crawford, Garcia said his bout with Lara could be the crowning achievement of his career as he bids the sport farewell.
That tells you where his head is at.
If he beats Lara, but he can't get a fight with Terence Crawford, he can't get a big money fight with a big money name, somebody with money behind them, he might retire off of that. That's if he wins. That's if he loses.
Especially if he loses.
This may be my last fight unless they call me with something that makes sense, Garcia told Boxing Scene. Winning a title in a third weight division would be legendary, but I'm a fighter, so I'm not thinking about that right now.
Yes, you are.
Philadelphia's Garcia last fought 2 years ago in July of 2022 when he captured a majority decision win against Jose Benavidez Jr. Garcia made headlines following the fight when he broke down in the ring discussing his struggles with mental health. Garcia was amazed by the public's reaction to his interview with Jim Gray on Showtime that night. Showtime, that is no longer in boxing. I never thought that interview would touch that many people, Garcia said. I learned that everybody can't be a world champion, but everyone can have a mental illness.
What's yours?
Because I see so many people inside of boxing and outside of boxing claiming to have mental health issues or a mental illness. A mental illness of what kind?
Crawford.
You never wanted to fight Crawford all that bad when you were at the same weight as Crawford for years, when you were right there alongside him at welterweight, back in the glory days of the PBC, when you guys took it upon yourselves to freeze him out. You didn't want to fight him then, but you want to fight him now.
Crawford.
You know that even if you do pull this off and become WBA middleweight champion, there's not big money in unifying with Carlos Adames or unifying with Yanni Bekalam-Kanalai. You know that, and so does everybody else. Where Terence, he's got Saudi money behind him, and that's why all of a sudden you're piping up and you're saying you'd fight him.
Crawford.
I don't know what to make of Garcia versus Lara as a fight. Everything about boxing and everything about these two boxers tells me that Lara should win the fight because he's the naturally bigger, longer, more experienced fighter at or around these weights.
Stronger.
Punch for punch, I think Lara is a stronger puncher than Danny Garcia. Danny's power hasn't been what it used to be since he left 140. He wasn't a particularly strong puncher at 147. He only fought once at 154.
Benavidez fight that went to the cards.
So now at 160, I don't think he's a stronger puncher than Arislandi Lara. Stylistically, Lara's economic, pot-shotting, outside fighting style doesn't do Danny's counter-punching style any favors. Lara doesn't throw punches in bunches enough where you can catch him in between, and that's what Danny relies on.
Has relied on.
That no-look hook in the heat of the exchange relies on the other guy throwing punches in bunches, putting punches together, whereas Lara only really throws 1 and 2 punches at a time. He goes for accuracy and defense.
Being defensible, thus economic.
Just everything about boxing tells me that Lara should win. He should be the one that wins this fight. He's got more experience at these weights. He's a bigger, longer fighter. Stylistically, he's got the edge. But there's something about this fight.
And Lara's actually fought in the last 12 months, that in the last 2 years, Lara's actually been more active than Danny.
But there's something about this fight that doesn't rub me the right way. The amount of time they've spent trying to make it. Remember that initially they wanted to make it last year, and they weren't able to do that. They weren't able to put it together, so they finally put it together this year.
It's saying that you've been trying to make this fight for Danny for over a year. Why?
What's so important about Danny Garcia fighting Arislandi Lara? What's so important about that? Why have you been working on that for such a long time? Why didn't you make a unification between Lara and Adames? They're both on that side of the street.
Why?
I don't view the PBC as real boxing. I want to get that off my chest. I don't view that as real boxing. When you see that Rolly Romero gets a gift over Jackson Marinez, then gets a gift stoppage over Ishmael Barroso.
It's not real boxing to me.
When I listen to the commentators call the action in the Benavidez versus Vajdik fight, their version of it versus what my eyes are telling me, what my own eyes are seeing,
The gaslighting.
it's just so agenda-driven. It almost feels like I'm not even watching a real boxing match, that whatever's going to happen here was already decided beforehand. Everything is preordained.
And I don't presume to be an expert.
Even if my predictions are often right for a fight or what's going to happen in the sport, still just a fan, though. Even as a fan, on that level, if you're watching and you're paying attention, there are things that you come to expect. So when you tell me that they've been trying to make this fight for over a year,
It's a red flag.
this is not a big money fight. It isn't. Lara versus Garcia, Danny Garcia. This is an undercard fight At the very best, it is what it is. A co-main.
You spent over a year trying to make this? Why?
And then you think about Lara, the defending champion in all of this, and how he's never been all that popular. He was never a marquee fighter, a big attraction. He never was. Danny was always a little bit more popular.
Though neither of them are all that popular now, talked about.
Though one might be more useful. Danny is a few years younger than Lara, more useful in the sense that maybe he can be used as a segue to get at a Crawford fight.
Terence Crawford, who's backed by Saudi money.
I don't like it, and I don't trust it. Based on the boxing, Lara should win. He has all the ingredients to win based on the boxing, but I don't actually view the PBC as real boxing.
It feels like they want to put a title in Danny Garcia's hands, and when the powers that be want to put a title in a fighter's hands, that is what ends up happening. That's what happened with Rolly.
How else could a blithering idiot like that end up a world champion, even if it was for a short while? How else could that have happened if it wasn't preordained? So when I look at this, that they've spent over a year trying to make this, and they finally made it, as much as I want to go with Lara, I don't know that I can.
So you're going with Danny?
I'm riding the fence. That's what I'm doing. I ain't picking nobody, because I don't know that this is a real boxing match. This could be scripted.
WWE Sports Entertainment.
Lara staying WBA middleweight champion doesn't really benefit the PBC, given that fighter's age and his track record, that as good as he is as a boxer, he's never going to be popular, least of all now when he's in his early 40s. So it doesn't really service him if he stays WBA champion.
Service them.
Danny is a little bit more useful. Danny Garcia for a long time now has appeared low-hanging fruit to a lot of boxers, anywhere in between 147 and 160. So when you make a proposition that you're willing to fight a Terence Crawford in defense of your title if you win it,
They might help him.
you know that I'm really not against that fight? For years now, I've been wanting to see Terence Crawford kick the crap out of this guy.
Yeah, but, I mean, would anybody give Terence credit for beating Danny now?
If he becomes WBA middleweight champion, they might. You can't claim that the guy's washed up and he's done if he becomes a champion at a third weight.
Terence at a fifth. If he takes Danny up on his offer, if it happens that way, I don't have a doubt in my mind Terence would beat the hell out of this guy.